Pennsylvania, 1872. A letter marked confidential arrives on the desk of every major oil refiner in Cleveland. Its sender is John D. Rockefeller's South Improvement Company. The terms are not an offer, they are a decree. Sign over control of your refinery, your life's work, to Rockefeller's trust, or be crushed. The railroad rebates that make your business viable will vanish. Your shipments will be delayed, your costs will skyrocket. You will be strangled in the cradle of the free market. This was not the invisible hand. This was the visible iron fist of monopoly. Within a few years, Rockefeller controlled over 90% of America's oil refining. The competitive capitalism of textbooks was giving way to a new, more brutal reality, the age of the robber baron. But what if Rockefeller's trust was not an aberration, but a prototype? What if monopoly is not the exception to the capitalist rule, but its logical, unavoidable endpoint? This is the story of a system that was meant to thrive on competition, but learned to profit from its absence. Welcome to the Gold Line. Today we are tracing the long arc of monopoly power. From the oil-soaked gushes of the 19th century to the data streams of the 21st, we will explore how economic concentration has shaped and ultimately defined American capitalism. We'll move through three distinct eras: the raw, predatory monopolies of the Gilded Age, the stable, oligopolistic corporations of the post-war industrial period, and the sleek, platform-based dominance of today's Magnificent Seven. Along the way, we'll use the lens of thinkers like Baran and Sweezy, who argued in Monopoly Capital that the tendency towards centralization is not a bug, but a fundamental feature of the system. Let's begin at the beginning with what Baran and Sweezy would call the era of competitive capitalism's transformation. After the Civil War, the United States experienced explosive industrial growth. Railroads, steel, oil, and telegraphy created vast new markets. The logic of this system, driven by countless small firms, was supposed to be competition, lower prices, better products, innovation. But a different logic emerged, the logic of increasing returns to scale. The bigger you became, the cheaper you could produce each additional unit. This created a powerful, perhaps irresistible incentive. Eliminate your competitors, control the market, and set the price yourself. John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil is the archetype. He didn't just outsell his rivals, he made it impossible for them to operate. He secured secret, exclusive rebates from railroads, so his oil shipped for far less. He built a pipeline network that competitors couldn't access. He engaged in predatory pricing, slashing prices in a region until a local competitor went bankrupt, then buying their assets for pennies and raising prices again. He vertically integrated, controlling everything from the wellhead to the barrel to the delivery wagon. The result was a trust, a legal arrangement that centralized control of an entire industry. It wasn't just market dominance, it was private governance. The trust decided who prospered, which towns thrived, what the price of an essential commodity would be. The political backlash led to the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, but the genie was out of the bottle. The era of small-scale competition was over. The age of massive concentrated economic power had begun. By the 1950s and 60s, the face of monopoly had changed. The wildcatting, predatory barons were gone. In their place stood the blue-chip corporation, General Motors, U.S. Steel, AT&T, IBM. These were not monopolies in the pure sense of one firm, but oligopolies, a handful of giant firms dominating an industry. This is where the theory of Baran and Sweezy becomes crucial. They argued that in this stage of monopoly capitalism, the central economic problem was no longer scarcity, but a surplus of capital and productive capacity. The driving fear for GM wasn't a small competitor making a better car. It was the fear of price wars with Ford and Chrysler that would destroy all their profits. So, competition transformed. It moved away from price cutting, which was now mutually assured destruction, and into other channels: planned obsolescence, massive advertising budgets, and superficial model differentiation. This was administered pricing. The big three automakers didn't discover the price of a car through market haggling. They calculated their costs, added a target profit margin, and set the price. The market adapted to their needs. This system was stable, profitable, and deeply intertwined with the state through military contracts and infrastructure projects. It created the affluent post-war society, but it also created what Baran and Sweezy called economic surplus, profits that were so vast, the corporation struggled to find productive, real economy investments for it all. An increasing amount of this surplus was funneled into financial speculation, marketing, and what economist William Lazonick would later call downsize and distribute strategies to boost shareholder value, sowing the seeds for later instability. The monopoly power was now mature, institutionalized, and wearing a suit. The transition to our current era begins with the decline of those industrial oligopolies and the rise of a new model, born in Silicon Valley, but perfected in the era of ubiquitous data. Today's monopolies, think Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, along with Nvidia and Tesla, making up the Magnificent Seven, are different in kind. They are not monopolies of a product, but of a platform, a network, or an ecosystem. Their power stems from what economists call network effects and control over data. The value of Facebook increases with every user added. The usefulness of Amazon's marketplace grows with every seller and buyer. Once a platform achieves critical mass, it becomes a natural monopoly. It's simply irrational for a user or a business to go anywhere else. This creates a power far more extensive than Rockefeller's. Standard Oil controlled the supply of oil. Amazon controls the marketplace, the logistics network, the cloud infrastructure for competitors, and crucially, the data on every transaction and consumer desire. It can see which products are succeeding on its platform and then launch its own, using its inherent advantages to dominate that too. This isn't just competing, it's being the referee, the stadium owner, and the star player all at once. Like the industrial oligopolies before them, these firms avoid price competition with each other. Amazon doesn't try to undercut Google's search ads. They dominate separate, data-rich kingdoms. Their competition is in acquiring potential rivals, lobbying regulators, and enclosing ever more aspects of life within their walled gardens. The economic surplus they generate is staggering, leading to trillion-dollar valuations and a level of cash hoarding that echoes the problems identified by Baran and Sweezy, now playing out on a global, digital scale. The history of monopoly is not a series of unrelated scandals. It is a continuous narrative of capital consolidating, adapting, and finding new ways to escape the disciplinary pressures of a competitive market. From Rockefeller's brute force vertical integration, to GM's administered price stability, to Amazon's algorithmic enclosure of the digital commons, the trajectory is toward greater concentration, greater power over prices and innovation, and a greater disconnect between corporate profit and social need. The old antitrust question was, are consumers paying higher prices? Today's monopolies often provide services for free. The better questions are, what are we paying with our data and our attention? How is monopoly power stifling innovation, eroding entrepreneurship, and shaping our politics and culture? The lesson from Standard Oil to the Magnificent Seven is that private power, once it reaches a certain scale, ceases to be merely economic. It becomes a governing force. The central struggle of our next economic era is what happens when a company reaches such mass that their business is an essential part of every aspect on our daily lives. Would we still be capable of pulling the reins of monopoly, or will its power surpass any authority? This has been The Gold Line. Until next time, understand the past to navigate the future.